The desert wind carried no mercy. It tasted of rust gasoline and the kind of heat that could crack stone. Barstow, California wasn't a town where people came to start over. It was where they came to disappear, buried under layers of dust and broken dreams that accumulated like the twisted metal in Frank Coleman's scrapyard. At 14, Lily Morgan had hands that told a story most girls her age would never understand. Her fingernails were permanently lined with black grease that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Her knuckles were scarred, crisscrossed with thin white lines from slipped wrenches and sharp metal edges. She wore her father's old work shirts, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, the fabric stained with oil that had soaked so deep it had become part of the weave. The sun was beginning its descent toward the jagged horizon when Lily dragged another twisted bumper toward the sorting pile. Sweat dripped down her temples, cutting clean tracks through the dust that coated her face. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid, though strands had escaped and stuck to her neck. She was small for her age, lean and angular built, more of sinew and determination than any softness. Coleman's Scrap and Salvage sprawled across 8 acres of desert hardpan on the eastern edge of Barstow. Mountains of crushed vehicles rose like metal pyramids against the sky. Rusted refrigerators stood sentinel alongside broken washing machines. The air always smelled of hot metal and diesel exhaust, punctuated by the occasional screech of Frank Coleman's ancient forklift as it moved another load of scrap. Frank himself was a fixture of the landscape, weathered and permanent as the Joshua trees that dotted the desert. He was 63, with a face like cracked leather and eyes that squinted perpetually against the sun. He'd owned this yard for 40 years, watching Barstow shrivel around him as the interstate pulled traffic away and the good jobs dried up. He paid Lily $5 an hour under the table. It wasn't legal, and they both knew it. But Frank needed the help, and Lily needed the money more than she needed a childhood. Sharon Morgan was dying by inches. That was how Lily thought of it during the long nights when she lay awake listening to her mother's rattling breath through the thin wall between their bedrooms. The asthma had started small, manageable. Then it had grown teeth. Now it was a monster that lived in Sharon's chest, squeezing tighter each year. The medical bills had started piling up when Lily was 10. By 12, they'd consumed everything. The small house they'd owned was gone sold to pay for one hospitalization. Now they rented a single-wide trailer on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the air conditioning rattled, like it was fighting for its life, and the water pressure was more of a suggestion than a guarantee. Sharon worked double shifts at the Route 66 diner, a grease-stained relic that catered to truckers and the occasional lost tourist. She came home smelling of fryer oil and coffee, her face gray with exhaustion. The good asthma medication cost $300 a month. The insurance they could afford covered maybe a third of it. The rest came out of what little they had. Lily had dropped out of school 6 months ago. The truancy officer had come around twice, but Sharon had manufactured excuses and eventually the visit stopped. Everyone in Barstow knew the Morgans were struggling. Most people just looked the other way. Lily didn't miss school much. What she missed was the auto shop class, the one place where she'd felt something close to belonging. Mr. Henderson, the shop teacher, had recognized something in her, a natural understanding of how machines worked. He'd let her stay after class working on the training engines long after the other students had left. But that was before the bills became insurmountable, before her mother started sitting up because lying down made the breathing worse, before Lily understood that sometimes survival meant sacrificing the future to pay for the present. Section G of Coleman's scrap hadn't been touched in nearly a decade. Frank had been putting off the job for years, knowing what waited back there. Rattlesnakes nested in the hollowed-out engine blocks. Black widows spun webs thick as cotton in the wheel wells. The desert had reclaimed that corner of the yard, tumbleweeds piling so high they'd formed a kind of wall. It was mid-July when Frank finally pointed Lily towards Section G with a resigned shake of his head. "Clear it out," he'd said, handing her a pair of heavy gloves and a long steel hook. "Anything salvageable goes to sorting, rest goes to the crusher, and for the love of God, watch for snakes." Lily had been working the section for 3 days when she found it. She'd been dragging away sheets of corrugated tin roofing, revealing layer after layer of desert detritus. Beneath a collapsed pile of wooden pallets and a decade's worth of accumulated tumbleweeds, sunlight caught something that made her stop mid-pull. Chrome, dulled and scratched but unmistakable. Curiosity overrode caution. Lily spent the next 4 hours excavating, working with a focus that blocked out the punishing heat and the ache in her shoulders. She used the steel hook to lever away the heavier debris, her hands working with a surgeon's precision around the fragile parts. What emerged took her breath away. It was a motorcycle, or rather it was the corpse of one, a skeleton of what had once been a magnificent machine. Even under the damage, Lily's trained eye recognized the lines, a 1998 Harley-Davidson Dyna Super glide. The front forks were bent inward at unnatural angles like arms broken in multiple places. The gas tank bore deep dents and scorch marks, black carbon scoring that spoke of fire. The leather seat had been destroyed, chewed to ribbons by scavengers and weather. But it was the engine that called to her. Despite the thick coating of oil-turned concrete and years of desert dust, there was something vital still there. Lily crouched beside it, pulling off her gloves to run her bare hands over the cylinder heads. The metal was warm from the sun, but beneath that surface heat, she felt something else. A potential, awaiting. "You found a ghost, kid." Lily jumped, spinning, to find Frank standing behind her, a cigarette dangling from his cracked lips. He squinted through the smoke at the wrecked machine, his expression unreadable. "State troopers towed this in 12 years back." Frank continued, his voice rough as gravel. "Nasty accident out on Route 66 about 40 miles east of here. Rider didn't make it. Nobody ever came to claim the bike, so it ended up here. Been buried ever since." Lily stood slowly, her heart hammering. "Can I have it?" Frank let out a bark of laughter that turned into a cough. "Have it? Christ, Lily, that engine is probably seized solid. The frame's likely bent beyond repair. You're looking at a very expensive paperweight. But can I?" Lily pressed her voice steady, despite the desperate hope rising in her chest. Frank studied her for a long moment. He'd watched this kid work for 6 months, seen the way she handled tools, like extensions of her own hands, noticed how she approached every broken thing with a quiet reverence. He'd been young once, driven by obsessions he couldn't explain to anyone who didn't feel them. "Don't let it cut into your sorting time," Frank finally said, turning away. "And don't come crying to me when you can't get it running." Lily didn't hear anything after the implicit yes. The Harley became her cathedral. She built a makeshift shelter over it using scavenged tarps and bent rebar, creating a workspace in the far corner of the yard where Frank's security lights barely reached. After her 8-hour shifts hauling scrap, she'd spend another 4, sometimes 6 hours hunched over the broken machine. Every dollar she earned went toward tools. She haunted the pawn shops in Barstow and the neighboring towns, buying socket sets with missing pieces, wrenches with worn chrome screwdrivers with cracked handles. None of it was pretty, but all of it worked. The motorcycle graveyard that flowed through Coleman's gates became her parts supplier. When a wrecked Sportster came in, she'd strip the carburetor before it went to the crusher. A destroyed Honda yielded a clutch cable. A mangled Yamaha donated its brake lines. She kept a mental catalog of every salvageable part, building her own private inventory. The first major challenge was the seized engine. Lily had read enough to know that 12 years of sitting in desert weather would have fused the pistons to the cylinder walls. The traditional method was to soak the cylinders in penetrating oil and pray. But traditional penetrating oil cost money Lily didn't have. She found her answer in a forum post from a long-haul trucker in Nebraska. A mixture of automatic transmission fluid and diesel fuel 50-50 ratio. She scavenged both from the yard's waste bins, mixing them in an old paint can. Using a syringe she'd bought at a farm supply store for $3, she filled each cylinder through the spark plug holes. Then she waited. 3 weeks of checking the bike every day, adding more mixture, rotating the engine by hand, with a breaker bar, feeling for any sign of give. Her knuckles bled from slipped grips. Her shoulders ached from the torque. But slowly and possibly, she felt the engine beginning to yield. The first full rotation of the crankshaft came on a Tuesday night in late September. Lily had been working by the light of a battery-powered lantern, her breath coming in short gasps as she threw all her weight onto the breaker bar. There was a grinding sound that made her teeth ache. Then suddenly the resistance gave way. The crankshaft turned a full 360 degrees. Lily dropped the breaker bar and pressed her forehead against the cool metal of the engine, her whole body shaking. It was alive. Damaged, broken, but alive. The rebuild consumed her. She stopped seeing friends, not that she'd had many to begin with. She ate dinner with her mother in silence, her mind always back at the scrapyard, calculating angles and clearances and compression ratios. Sharon watched her daughter disappear into this obsession with a mixture of concern and understanding. She'd been married to a man who'd loved motorcycles the same way who'd died on one when Lily was 6 years old. Winter came to the desert, bringing cold nights that made working in the unheated tarp shelter almost unbearable. Lily wore 2 jackets and gloves with the fingers cut off so she could still feel the tools. Her breath came out in clouds that caught in the lantern light. She rebuilt the carburetor using parts from 3 different sources, mixing and matching jets and needles until she had something that might work. She straightened the bent forks using Frank's hydraulic press, sneaking in after the old man had gone home for the night, working in terrified silence, so he wouldn't catch her using equipment she wasn't qualified to operate. The gas tank's dents were beyond her ability to fix properly, but she hammered them out as best she could from the inside using a technique she'd learned from a YouTube video. The scorch marks wouldn't come off, so she decided to make them part of the aesthetic. It was while she was cleaning inside the handlebars that she found the compartment. The right bar was heavier than the left, and when she shone a flashlight down the hollow interior, she saw that it had been custom modified. Someone had welded a cap at one end, creating a sealed cavity. It took her 2 hours to carefully cut through the weld without damaging whatever was inside. When the cap finally came free, a small PVC pipe tumbled out onto her workbench. The pipe was sealed with the electrical tape gone brittle with age. Lily's hands trembled as she peeled it away. Inside were 2 items. The first was a pair of military dog tags, the metal dull with tarnish. She held them under the lantern light, reading the embossed letters. Arthur Blackwell, blood type O positive. The religious preference line said none. The second item was a ring. Heavy silver, substantial enough that Lily knew immediately it was custom made. She wiped away the grime with her thumb, revealing an intricate engraving. A skull with wings surrounded by flames. Above it, in Gothic script, 3 words. Hell's Angels MC. Lily sat back on her overturned bucket. The ring heavy in her palm. She'd heard of the Hell's Angels, of course. Everyone had. They were part of the mythology of the American highway outlaws and rebels who lived by their own codes. Dangerous men who inspired fear and grudging respect in equal measure. She pulled out her phone, the screen cracked but functional, and searched. The articles that came up painted a picture of an organization that was part motorcycle club, part criminal enterprise, federal investigations, violence, a brotherhood bound by blood and loyalty so fierce it bordered on religion. Lily looked at the dog tags, then at the stripped frame of the motorcycle. This machine had belonged to someone named Arthur Blackwell, someone who'd worn that ring, who'd ridden with the Hells Angels, someone who'd died on Route 66 12 years ago. She should probably tell someone, Frank maybe, or the police. But even as the thought formed, she pushed it away. This bike was hers now. She'd pulled it from the dirt. She was bringing it back to life. The secrets it carried were part of that resurrection. Lily slipped the dog tags over her head, tucking them under her shirt where they rested cold against her sternum. The ring she wrapped carefully in an oil-stained rag and placed in the bottom of her toolbox. Then she went back to work. By March, 8 months after she'd first uncovered the Harley, Lily had transformed the wreck into something that could almost be called a motorcycle again. It wasn't pretty. The frame was mismatched blacks and grays where she'd patched and welded. The tank still bore its scorch marks. The seat was a salvaged piece from a different model, entirely the leather cracked, but functional. But the engine was her masterpiece. She'd rebuilt it with a precision that would have impressed trained mechanics twice her age. New gaskets, honed cylinders, fresh rings. She'd scavenged a battery from a wrecked car, rigged a charging system from spare parts. The exhaust she'd pieced together from 3 different pipes, welding them in Frank's shop when he wasn't looking. The morning she decided to attempt the first start, Lily arrived at the scrapyard before dawn. She wanted to be alone for this, just her and the machine, and the possibility of failure. She'd filled the patched gas tank the night before using premium fuel she'd paid for with money that should have gone toward groceries. She'd checked and rechecked every connection, every cable, every adjustment. There was nothing left to do but try. Lily straddled the bike, feeling the weight of it beneath her for the first time. It felt right, balanced, despite its Frankenstein origins. She turned the key in the ignition she'd rewired, listening to the fuel pump prime with a whir that sounded like hope. Then she raised her leg and brought her boot down hard on the Kickstarter. Nothing. The engine didn't even turn over. It was like kicking solid steel. Lily adjusted the choke, checked the kill switch, and tried again. Still nothing. Her heart began to sink, that familiar despair creeping in the voice that said she'd wasted 8 months on an impossible dream. She kicked again and harder this time, putting all her frustration and fear and desperate hope into the motion. The engine coughed, a single choking sound followed by a puff of black smoke from the exhaust. Lily's hands were shaking now. She adjusted the throttle, whispered a prayer to God she didn't believe in, and kicked with everything she had. The Harley-Davidson exploded to life. The sound was violence, given voice a roar that echoed off the metal mountains of the scrapyard and sent birds scattering from their perches. It wasn't smooth or refined. The engine ran rough, misfiring slightly, the rhythm uneven. But it was running alive, resurrected from death by a 14-year-old girl with bleeding knuckles and an obsession she couldn't explain. Lily didn't realize she was crying until the tears blurred her vision. She sat on the idling motorcycle, her whole body shaking, listening to the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. The vibration traveled up through the frame and into her bones, a frequency that felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. Frank Coleman found her 20 minutes later, still sitting on the running bike, tears cutting tracks through the grease on her face. He didn't say anything, just stood there watching, a rare smile touching his weathered features. When Lily finally met his eyes, he gave her a single nod of respect, then turned and walked away. Over the next month, Lily refined her creation. She spent hours adjusting the carburetor until the engine ran smoother, though it never lost its aggressive snarl. She hammered out more dents, tightened every bolt she could reach, and finally painted the entire machine in flat black primer to hide the patchwork nature of its construction. It was ugly, but it was fast. And more importantly, it was hers. She began taking it out in the evenings after Frank had locked up and gone home. There were miles of abandoned dirt roads behind the scrapyard riverbeds that had been dry for decades, stretches of hardpan where she could open the throttle and feel the desert wind strip away everything except the pure, simple joy of speed. For the first time since her father died, Lily felt something close to peace. On the motorcycle, she wasn't a dropout, struggling to keep her mother alive. She wasn't a girl in a dead-end town with no prospects and no future. She was just movement and machine, two things working in perfect harmony. But a Harley-Davidson running that loud and that rough couldn't be kept secret forever. The desert carried sound in strange ways, and people in Barstow noticed things. Lily knew she was pressing her luck every time she fired up the engine, but the risk felt worth it. The fatal mistake happened on a Tuesday in late April. Lily had been riding one of the dirt roads farther from town than she usually ventured. She'd lost track of time chasing the sunset across the desert, and when she finally glanced at the jury-rigged fuel gauge she'd installed, her stomach dropped. The needle sat firmly on empty. She coasted as far as the bike would take her, but she was still 2 miles from Coleman's when the engine coughed and died. Cursing, Lily dismounted and began the long push back toward town. The Harley was heavy, easily 400 pounds, and pushing it through sand was like trying to move a boulder uphill. By the time she reached the highway, her shoulders were screaming and sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cooling evening air. There was a Shell station another half-mile up the road, an isolated outpost of fluorescent light in the gathering darkness. Lily pushed the bike into the station, her arms trembling with exhaustion. She had $12 in crumpled bills in her pocket, enough for maybe 2 gallons of gas. It would be enough to get back to the scrapyard. She was standing at the pump feeding her precious dollars into the machine when she heard the rumble of an engine pulling up behind her. A beat-up Ford pickup, probably older than she was, with a camper shell held on by visible prayers and rust. The driver who stepped out was someone Lily recognized, though she'd never learned his real name. Everyone in Barstow called him Pete the Rat, or just Rat, when he wasn't around to hear it. He was in his 40s, rail-thin, with the twitchy energy of someone who sampled his own product. He dealt meth out of a trailer park on the north side of town, small-time but mean. Rat's eyes locked onto the Harley immediately, and Lily saw his expression change from casual disinterest to sharp, predatory focus. "Well, well," Rat said, walking over with a rolling gait that suggested he was already high. "What do we have here?" Lily kept her eyes down, focusing on the gas pump. "Just getting gas." "I can see that, sweetheart." Rat circled the bike slowly, his gaze cataloging every detail. "But what I'm wondering is where a little girl like you gets a machine like this." "Built it," Lily muttered, willing the pump to move faster. Rat laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Built it? Sure you did." He crouched down, examining the custom exhaust pipes, running his grimy fingers over the welds. "These pipes are professional work. TIG-welded heavy-gauge steel, and this frame geometry." He stood up, pulling out a phone with a cracked screen. "This is custom work, real custom, not something a kid builds in a junkyard." The pump clicked off. Lily quickly unscrewed the cap, her hand shaking slightly. "I need to go." "Hold on now." Rat positioned himself between Lily and the bike, his phone raised. He snapped 3 photos in quick succession, making sure to catch Lily's face in at least one of them. "I know people who pay good money for information about bikes like this, especially bikes that might not exactly be on the up and up." "It's mine," Lily said, her voice harder now. "I found it. I fixed it." "Found it?" Where Rat's eyes narrowed. "Because I'm thinking this bike has a history. And I'm thinking maybe you don't want that history coming to light. Lily's heart was hammering now, but she forced herself to stay calm. She dealt with bullies at school, with men who thought a young girl was easy prey. She'd learned that showing fear only made them worse. "Leave me alone," she said evenly, swinging her leg over the Harley. Or what? Rat stepped closer, invading her space. "You gonna tell your mommy?" "Oh, wait, I heard your mommy's too busy dying to pay attention to what her little girl." Lily kicked the starter with savage force, and the Harley roared to life with a sound like artillery fire. The noise made Rat stumble backward, and in that moment of surprise, Lily twisted the throttle and tore out of the gas station gravel spraying from the rear tire. She didn't look back. Her whole focus was on getting to the scrapyard to safety, to somewhere Rat couldn't follow. Her hands were shaking on the handlebars, adrenaline and fear mixing into a toxic cocktail in her bloodstream. She thought she'd escaped. She thought the encounter would fade into just another unpleasant memory of life in Barstow. She had no idea that within 20 minutes, Rat had sent those photos to a contact in San Bernardino, or that from there they'd been forwarded to a clubhouse in Oakland, or that by midnight those images would be projected onto a wall in a smoke-filled room where the most dangerous men on the West Coast sat in absolute silence. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club had been searching for Dutch Blackwell's bike for 12 years. They'd scoured salvage yards from San Diego to Sacramento. They'd leaned on cops and mechanics and anyone who might have seen it. The official story was that the bike had burned in the crash, reduced to slag and ash. But the club had never believed it. Dutch's Harley was a custom build, one of a kind. The exhaust pipes alone were worth thousands, hand-welded by Dutch himself using techniques he'd learned in the Navy. The frame had been modified by a legendary builder in Oakland geometry, adjusted for Dutch's riding style. More than that, it was sacred. Dutch Blackwell had been more than just a member. He'd saved 3 chapter presidents from certain death. He'd ridden through blizzards to help brothers bury their fathers. He was a legend, and his bike was a relic. When the bike disappeared, it left a wound in the club that had never healed. Now, staring at the photos on the wall, James "Iron" Callahan felt something shift in his chest. Iron was the nomad president, a man who'd spent 40 years earning his place at the table. He was built like a freight train, 6'4", and 260 pounds of muscle going to gray. His beard was thick and steel-colored, his eyes the pale blue of desert ice. He'd been Dutch's sponsor when he'd prospected for the San Bernardino charter in 1983. Dutch had taught him how to ride in formation, how to fight with knives, how to survive in a world that wanted to grind men like them into dust. Iron leaned forward in his chair, studying the photos. He recognized the exhaust pipes immediately, those distinctive welds that only Dutch could have made. He saw the frame geometry, the angle of the rake that was Dutch's signature. And he saw the 14-year-old girl sitting on his brother's stolen legacy. The room was silent, waiting for Iron's judgment. "Mount up," Iron said, his voice leaving no room for debate. His words fell like stones into still water. "We're going to Barstow. 3 days, that's how long it took to mobilize." Word went out through the network, chapter by chapter, charter by charter. Hells Angels from San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, Fresno, San Bernardino, Riverside. They came from everywhere, converging on Barstow like an army responding to a call to war. 305 motorcycles, an armada of chrome and leather, and barely controlled violence. Lily knew nothing of the storm gathering on the horizon. She went to work at Coleman's the next morning, her encounter with Rat already fading to background worry. She had more immediate concerns. Her mother's medication was running low again, and the money Lily had set aside for it had gone toward brake pads for the Harley. She was in the sorting area, organizing copper wire by gauge when she felt it. A vibration in the ground, subtle at first, then growing stronger. The kind of tremor that made coffee slosh in cups and set loose objects rattling. Lily straightened, her hands stilling on the wire. The vibration was intensifying, accompanied now by a sound. Low at first, almost subsonic, then rising to a drone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She walked toward the chain-link fence that separated the scrapyard from the highway, her heart beginning to hammer with a fear she couldn't name. They appeared on the horizon like a dark tide flowing down the desert highway in a staggered formation that stretched as far as she could see. The sound was overwhelming now, a synchronized thunder that shook the very air. Motorcycles, hundreds of them. Barstow stopped breathing. Traffic pulled over. People emerged from shops and houses to watch the river of chrome and leather flood through their town. The local police cruisers sat parked on the shoulders, officers standing beside their vehicles in tense silence, hands resting on their service weapons, but making no move to intervene. This wasn't something you stopped. This was something you survived. The formation broke as it reached Coleman's scrap and salvage motorcycles peeling off to surround the entire property. They parked in perfect rows, 3 deep, encircling the scrapyard like a noose. 305 men on 300 by Harley-Davidson's engines, idling in a symphony of controlled thunder. The dust they'd raised hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Through it, Lily could see them. Leather vests covered in patches and insignia, beards and sunglasses and expressions carved from stone. This was power incarnate, danger made manifest. Frank Coleman came running out of his office, his clipboard clattering to the ground. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered. The engines cut off almost simultaneously, leaving a silence so profound it hurt Lily's ears. Then from the front of the pack, a man dismounted. He was massive, built on a scale that made ordinary men look like children. 4 more men followed him, each carrying themselves with the dangerous grace of professional violence. The leader walked to the chain-link gate. He didn't shout or gesture. He simply wrapped one huge hand around the chain that held the gate closed and looked at Frank. "Open it," James Iron Callahan said. Frank's hands shook so badly he dropped the keys twice before he managed to get them into the padlock. The chain rattled free, and he swung the gate open, stepping back quickly. "We don't want any trouble," Frank stammered. "Whatever you need, gentlemen, whatever." Iron walked past him without a glance, his eyes scanning the scrapyard. The 4 enforcers followed, fanning out slightly. Behind them, the 300 other men waited in absolute silence, a wall of leather and patience and promised violence. Lily stood frozen in the sorting area. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't respond. She watched as the giant man's gaze swept across the yard and locked onto the far corner where her makeshift tarp shelter stood. Then his eyes found her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lily clutched the copper wire in her hands like a lifeline, her knuckles white. Iron studied her, taking in the grease-stained clothes, the scarred hands, the defiant tilt of her chin, despite the fear in her eyes. He started walking toward her, his boots crunching on gravel. The 4 men followed. 300 men outside watched through the chain-link fence. Lily made a decision. Instead of running, she walked to the tarp shelter and positioned herself in front of the flat black Harley. She picked up a heavy wrench from her toolbox, not because she thought she could use it, but because having something in her hands made her feel less helpless. Iron stopped 10 feet away. Up close, he was even more intimidating, a mountain of leather and muscle and cold authority. The patch on his vest read "Nomad President" in letters that looked like they'd been forged from Iron themselves. "That's not your bike, Kid," Iron said. His voice was surprisingly quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "That belongs to a ghost, and you're going to step away from it right now." Lily's throat was dry as sand. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She knew she should comply, should step aside, should do anything except what she did next. "No," Lily said, her voice shaking but audible. She tightened her grip on the wrench. I brought it back to life. It's mine. A collective murmur rippled through the men at the fence, 300 voices rising in disbelief. One of the enforcers, a man whose face was a roadmap of scars, took a step forward, his hand moving toward his belt. "Hold, Iron," said, raising one hand. His eyes never left Lily. "You got stones, girl. I'll give you that. But you're standing on holy ground and you don't even know it." He took a step closer and Lily forced herself not to retreat. Iron crouched down beside the Harley, his knees popping audibly. He reached out and ran his bare hand over the engine block, his fingers tracing the lines of the cylinders with a familiarity that spoke of deep knowledge. "Dutch welded these exhaust pipes himself," Iron said almost to himself. "Back in '96, Oakland charter. Used a TIG welder he won in a poker game off a Navy shipwright. He said he wanted pipes that sounded like the end of the world." Iron stood towering over Lily again. "How did you unseize this engine? State police let it sit in the weather for a decade. The block should have been welded solid." Despite her terror, Lily felt a flicker of pride. "I soaked the cylinders in diesel fuel and transmission fluid for 3 weeks," she said, the words tumbling out. "Then I used a breaker bar and the crankshaft nut rocked it back and forth millimeters at a time every night after my shift. I rebuilt the carburetor with parts from a Sportster. I remachined the brake rotors on a lathe." Another murmur from the fence, different this time. These were men who understood exactly how difficult that work was, how much skill and patience it required. To hear that a scrawny teenage girl had done it alone with scavenged tools bordered on miraculous. Iron's expression softened fractionally. "You've got surgeon's hands and a mule's stubbornness." He paused. "But you're missing something." There was a custom hollow in the handlebar. Lily's blood turned to ice. She knew exactly what he meant. Slowly, carefully, she lowered the wrench. She backed away from the motorcycle and walked to her red toolbox. From the bottom drawer beneath the greasy rags, she retrieved the dog tags and the ring. She'd wrapped them together in an oilcloth, keeping them safe. She walked back and placed them in Iron's outstretched palm. Iron opened the cloth. The silver ring caught the harsh desert sunlight, the winged skull seeming to move in the play of light and shadow. He picked up the dog tags, reading the name stamped into the metal. For a long moment, the most feared man on the West Coast just stood there, staring at a piece of silver and 2 strips of stamped aluminum. When he finally looked up, Lily saw something she hadn't expected in those ice-blue eyes. Grief, raw and deep and unhealed. Arthur Blackwell Iron said softly, his thumb tracing the embossed letters. "We called him Dutch. He was my sponsor when I prospected for the San Bernardino charter in '83. He taught me how to ride in a pack, how to fight, how to survive." Iron's voice had gone rough, thick with emotion. "When he went down on Route 66, they told us there was nothing left. No bike, no colors, no ring. They said he burned up to nothing." He looked up and Lily saw wetness in his eyes that might have been tears. "For 12 years, his widow hasn't had his ring. His brothers haven't had closure. You didn't just dig up a motorcycle kid. You dug up a ghost we desperately needed to put to rest." Lily's chest tightened. She looked at the Harley, her sanctuary, her escape, her ticket to something better. The machine she'd bled for, cried over, brought back from death through sheer force of will. "So you're taking it," she said quietly. Iron slipped the ring and dog tags into the breast pocket of his vest right over his heart. He looked at the bike, then back at Lily. "Club law is club law," he said, his voice returning to its authoritative rumble. "A civilian cannot possess a patch member's death bike. It's sacred. It belongs to the Hells Angels. It goes back to Oakland Clubhouse, sits in the center of the table." He paused. "I'm sorry, but this machine doesn't belong to you." The tears came hot and humiliating. Lily didn't care that 300 dangerous men were watching. She only cared about the injustice crushing down on her. "It's not fair," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You didn't fix it. You didn't bleed for it. I need this bike. I need it to—" Her voice broke. "My mother is sick. She's drowning in medical debt. This was going to save us. It's the only valuable thing I've ever had in my whole life." The silence that fell was absolute and terrible. Even the desert wind seemed to still. One of the enforcers, the scarred one, made a dismissive sound, but Iron turned and looked at him with such venom that the man actually stepped back. Iron turned away from Lily and faced the mass of leather and chrome outside the gates. He raised his right fist high in the air. "Officers," he roared, his voice carrying across the scrapyard like thunder. "Front and center, we're having church." Right there in the middle of Frank Coleman's scrapyard, with the Mojave sun beating down like a hammer on an anvil, the Hells Angels held church. 50 men detached from the formation outside. Presidents, vice presidents, sergeants at arms, road captains. The highest-ranking members from chapters spanning the entire state of California. They filed through the gate in silence, their boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. Frank Coleman locked himself in his office, peering through the blinds with the wide-eyed terror of a man watching his own death unfold in slow motion. The officers formed a circle around Iron, the resurrected Harley, and Lily. It was a tight formation, bodies almost touching, creating a wall that shut out the rest of the world. Inside that circle, the temperature seemed to rise another 10 degrees. Lily could smell leather and sweat, and motor oil could feel the weight of their collective attention like a physical presence. Iron stood in the center, his massive frame dominating the space. "We have a situation," he announced, his voice carrying to every man in the circle. "This girl found Dutch's iron. She resurrected a dead engine block that by all rights should have been scrap metal. She found the ring, found the tags, and she kept them safe. She didn't pawn them. She didn't melt them down. She treated the machine with respect." "The bike comes with us," Iron said, a heavily tattooed man whose vest bore a San Francisco rocker. His voice was flat, brooking no argument. "That's not up for debate. Sonny's old rules dictate it. Dutch's bike sits in the Oakland clubhouse. Forever." "I know the damn rules," Michael Iron snapped back, his eyes flashing. "The bike goes to Oakland. I'm not questioning that. But the Hells Angels don't steal from civilians who do us a service either." He turned slowly in the center of the circle, making eye contact with each man in turn. "This kid gave us our brother back. She put 8 months of hard labor into a machine that should have been impossible to save. The girl says her mother is sick. She says she built this bike to save her." Iron's voice dropped lower, more intense. "We talk about respect. We talk about honor. We talk about brotherhood. So I'm asking you, brothers, what's the price of a soul? What do we owe the person who brought Dutch Blackwell home?" The circle went completely quiet. Lily stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, watching these dangerous men weigh her fate. Some of them looked at the Harley, seeing the meticulous work beneath the ugly primer paint. Others looked at her, taking in the grease-stained clothes, the scarred knuckles, the defiant stance, despite obvious terror. Michael, the San Francisco president, reached slowly inside his vest. He pulled out a thick wad of $100 bills bound in a rubber band. Without a word, he tossed it onto the leather seat of the Harley. "Dutch saved my life in a bar fight in Reno," Michael said simply. "Took a knife meant for my throat. That's for the kid's labor." Another biker stepped forward, an older man with white in his beard, imprisoned tattoos crawling up his neck. He pulled a gold money clip from his pocket, peeled off several large bills, and added them to the pile. "Dutch rode 200 miles in a thunderstorm to help me bury my father," the man said. "He sat with me all night while I drank myself stupid. Pay the girl." It happened like a chain reaction, like dominoes falling in reverse. One by one, the most feared men on the West Coast stepped forward in the blistering desert heat. They reached into their vests, their pockets, their wallets. They pulled out cash, hundreds, 50s, 20s, and tossed it onto the growing pile. Dutch taught me how to rebuild my first transmission. Dutch rode shotgun when we had to collect a debt in Fresno, saved my ass when it went sideways. Dutch loaned me $3 grand when my kid needed surgery. Never asked for it back. Dutch was the best man at my wedding. Each man who contributed spoke a memory, a debt, a moment when Arthur Dutch Blackwell had been there. The pile of green paper grew into a small mountain bills, cascading onto the dusty ground around the bike. Lily watched in stunned silence, tears streaming freely down her face now. She'd never seen anything like this. These weren't men showing off their wealth. This was something else entirely. This was ritual tribute, a brotherhood paying honor to one of their own by honoring the girl who'd brought him back. When the last man had stepped forward, when the circle finally stilled again, Iron walked over to the Harley. He scooped up the massive pile of cash with both hands, easily over $20,000, and walked to Lily. He grabbed her small, grease-stained hands and pressed the money into them, folding her fingers around the bills. "Club business pays its debts." Iron said, his voice softer now, but no less intense. "This covers your labor, your storage fees, and your mother's medical bills. You take this to her today. You understand me, girl." Lily looked down at the fortune in her hands, completely overwhelmed. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I don't know what to say." "You don't say anything," Iron replied, "but we're taking the bike." He gave a sharp whistle, and two massive Prospects men trying to earn their patches ran into the yard, pushing a custom-built trailer behind a heavy-duty pickup truck. They moved with reverent care as they approached the Harley, treating it like a religious artifact. With gentle, practiced movements, they loaded Dutch's bike onto the trailer, securing it with soft straps that wouldn't scratch the metal. Lily watched her 8-month obsession disappear onto that trailer, and despite the money in her hands, despite the miracle she'd just witnessed, she felt a hollow ache in her chest. The bike had been more than transportation or money. It had been purpose. It had been the only thing in her life that made sense, that responded to her efforts with measurable results. Fixing that motorcycle had made her feel capable, powerful, like she could solve impossible problems through sheer determination. Now it was leaving, and she was just a 14-year-old dropout again. As the Prospects finished securing the load, Iron gave another sharp whistle. Bobby Chains Rourke, the scarred enforcer who'd wanted to move on Lily earlier, rode his massive Road King into the yard. But he wasn't alone. Using one powerful arm, he was steering a second motorcycle alongside his own, guiding it with practiced ease. It was a 2004 Harley-Davidson Sportster 1200. The paint was faded and chipped, showing primer in places. The chrome was dull with age and neglect. The exhaust was stock and slightly rusted, but the engine looked solid and all the important parts seemed intact. Chains kicked down the stand and dismounted, leaving the Sportster sitting in the dirt next to Lily. He didn't say a word, just gave her a long, evaluating look before walking back to his own bike and riding out of the yard. Iron watched the exchange, then turned to Lily. "It's a starter bike," he said. "Clean title, the paperwork's in the saddlebag. Keys are in the ignition. Belonged to a prospect who decided the life wasn't for him. It needs love. Carburetor needs rebuilding and it could use fresh paint. But from what I've seen today, you're exactly the person for the job." Lily stared at the Sportster, then back at Iron, her mouth hanging open. "For me, a mechanic without a bike is a tragedy," Iron said. And for the first time, Lily saw the hint of a smile touch his lips. It didn't make him look less dangerous, but it made him look more human. "And kid, when you turn 18, if you ever get tired of hauling scrap for Coleman, you ride that Sportster out to San Bernardino. Ask for the Purdue charter. Tell them Iron sent you." He leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer to her level. We always have room in our shops for a surgeon. Iron straightened and turned his back, striding toward his own motorcycle with the 4 enforcers falling in behind him like an honor guard. The 50 officers followed, filing out of the scrapyard in the same disciplined silence they'd entered with. Iron mounted his bike, a custom bagger that probably cost more than Frank's entire business. The engine roared to life with a twist of his wrist, and 304 other engines answered the call. The synchronized sound was apocalyptic, a mechanical thunder that shook dust from the corrugated tin roofs of Barstow and set off car alarms 3 blocks away. Lily stood in the dirt, clutching $20,000 to her chest, with one hand the keys to her new motorcycle gleaming in the ignition beside her. She watched as the sea of leather and chrome rolled out of town in perfect formation, taking the ghost of Dutch Blackwell home. The massive convoy wound its way back onto the desert highway like a great serpent growing smaller in the distance until finally disappearing over the horizon. The rumble of their engines faded, gradually replaced by the normal sounds of the desert wind through metal, the distant call of a hawk, the tick of cooling exhaust pipes. The storm had passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the scrapyard in an eerie, ringing silence. But the air felt different now. The oppressive weight of hopelessness that had hung over Lily's life had lifted. The scent of rust and desperation was gone, replaced by the lingering smell of high-octane gasoline and the undeniable promise of open roads yet to come. Frank Coleman finally emerged from his office, his face still pale. He walked over to Lily on shaking legs and just stood there, staring at the money in her hands. The Sportster sitting in the dust, the empty space where Dutch's Harley had been. "Kid," he finally said, his voice hoarse, "I've been running this yard for 40 years. I've seen a lot of strange things, but I have never in my entire life seen anything like what just happened here." Lily looked up at him, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Mr. Coleman." "You just made a deal with the devil," Frank interrupted, then paused, reconsidering. "Or maybe angels. Hell, I can't tell which." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder, a rare gesture of affection from the gruff old man. "Go home, Lily. Take that money to your mother. And tomorrow you come back here and we're going to talk about a raise. Because any kid who can impress the Hells Angels deserves more than $5 an hour." Lily nodded, unable to form words. She carefully tucked the money into her backpack, then walked over to the Sportster. She ran her hand over the faded paint, feeling the potential beneath the neglect. It wasn't as powerful as Dutch's Dyna, wasn't as mythic or meaningful, but it was hers legally and completely. And it needed her. She swung her leg over the seat, feeling the familiar weight of a motorcycle beneath her. The key turned smoothly, and when she pressed the starter button, the engine turned over on the second try. It ran rough, missing slightly, exactly the kind of problem she knew how to fix. Lily rode home slowly, conscious of the precious cargo in her backpack and her own inexperience on the street. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, painting the desert in shades of amber and copper. Barstow slid past her, the boarded-up storefronts, the faded murals, the people standing in doorways watching her ride by. News traveled fast in a small town. By now, everyone knew about the invasion. Everyone knew that the Morgan girl had somehow walked away from a confrontation with 300 Hells Angels, not just alive but richer. The look she received ranged from shock to respect to naked envy. Lily didn't care about any of it. She only cared about getting home. The single-wide trailer looked exactly as she'd left it that morning. Weathered aluminum siding, a struggling air conditioning unit, a tiny patch of gravel that served as a yard. But now it represented something different. Now it represented possibility. Sharon Morgan was in the kitchen, leaning heavily against the counter as she chopped vegetables for dinner. Her breathing was labored, each exhale a wheeze that Lily had learned to gauge like a barometer of her mother's condition. Today was a bad day. Lily Sharon turned, surprise crossing her tired face. "You're home early. Is everything She stopped seeing her daughter's expression. What happened? Lily set her backpack on the small kitchen table and opened it. She pulled out the money still in its chaotic pile of different denominations and spread it across the formica surface. Sharon's knife clattered to the floor. Baby, what? Sharon's voice failed her. She reached out with a shaking hand, touching the bills as if they might disappear. Where did this come from? Lily, what did you do? And Lily told her. Everything. Finding the Harley, the 8 months of secret work, the ring, and the Bosch Pete the rat, and finally the terrifying arrival of the Hells Angels. She spoke quickly, the words tumbling over each other, watching her mother's face cycle through shock, fear, anger, and finally something that might have been awe. When Lily finished, Sharon sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her hand pressed against her chest. For a long moment she didn't speak, just sat there breathing carefully, processing what she'd heard. These are dangerous men, Lily. Sharon finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Hells Angels, they're not heroes. They're criminals. Drug dealers. Violent criminals. I know, Mama, Lily said quietly. But they paid me fair. And they gave me a bike. And She struggled to find the words. They treated me with respect. When they could have just taken everything they chose to pay. Sharon looked at the money spread across the table. Lily watched her mother's face, saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. $20,000. Enough to pay off the hospital debt completely. Enough to buy a year's worth of good medication. Enough to fix the air conditioning, to repair the car, to buy groceries without counting every penny. Enough to breathe in more ways than one. Sharon started crying, quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks unchecked. We can pay the hospital, she whispered. Oh God, Lily, we can actually pay them. Lily moved around the table and wrapped her arms around her mother, feeling the fragile bones, the way Sharon's body shook with each breath. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the small kitchen of their small trailer, while the desert sun painted long shadows across the money that represented a second chance. That night, Lily lay in her narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling and listening to her mother's breathing through the thin wall. For the first time in months, Sharon was sleeping lying down instead of propped up in a chair. The relief in that simple fact made Lily's chest tight with emotion. She thought about Dutch Blackwell, a man she'd never met but whose presence had shaped the last 8 months of her life. She thought about Iron Callahan, terrifying and honorable in equal measure. She thought about the circle of hard men who'd emptied their pockets to pay tribute to a fallen brother through a teenage girl they'd never see again. And she thought about the Sportster sitting outside waiting for her attention, ready to be transformed. Lily pulled the dog tags from where they still hung around her neck. She'd forgotten to give them to Iron, or maybe some part of her had wanted to keep them. She held them up, reading the name in the dim light filtering through her window. Arthur Blackwell, blood type O positive, no religious preference. Thank you, Lily whispered to the ghost. I'll make you proud. She tucked the tags back under her shirt and closed her eyes, falling into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in 8 months. The Mojave Desert kept its secrets well, but sometimes, just sometimes, it gave back what it had taken. In a scrapyard in Barstow, a 14-year-old girl had reached into the dirt and pulled out more than a motorcycle. She'd pulled out a lifeline, a future, and the respect of men who gave their respect to almost no one. The next morning, Lily woke before dawn. Old habits died hard and her body was accustomed to early starts. She dressed quietly, grabbed a piece of toast, and headed outside to where the Sportster waited. In the pale pre-dawn light, the bike looked rough, but Lily had learned to see past surface damage to the potential beneath. She spent an hour just examining it, taking mental notes of everything that needed attention. The carburetor was gummed up with old gum. The clutch cable was frayed, the brake pads were worn thin, the electrical system was questionable at best. But the engine was solid, and solid was all she needed to start. Over the next week, Barstow slowly returned to normal. The story of the Hells Angels invasion became legend, growing with each retelling until the facts were buried under layers of embellishment. Some said there had been 500 bikers. Others claimed they'd been looking for a stolen fortune in drugs. A few people whispered that Lily Morgan had made some kind of dark deal, sold her soul for that money. Lily ignored all of it. She paid off the hospital debt in full, watching the relief bloom on her mother's face when the confirmation letter arrived. She bought Sharon's medication, the good kind that actually worked, and watched her mother's health improve day by day. She fixed the air conditioning, replaced the bald tires on their car, and stocked the cupboards with food that wasn't from the clearance aisle. And every evening after her shift at Coleman's, she worked on the Sportster. Frank had made good on his promise, raising her pay to $10 an hour and giving her access to the shop's tools during off hours. Lily rebuilt the carburetor with a precision born of hard-won experience. She replaced the clutch cable, installed new brake pads, rewired the electrical system. She learned the Sportster's quirks and personality, the way it was different from Dutch's Dyna, but no less worthy of respect. She sanded down the tank and fenders, spending hours removing old paint and smoothing out imperfections. Then she saved up enough money to buy proper motorcycle paint, a deep metallic blue that reminded her of the desert sky just after sunset. The transformation took 6 weeks. When Lily finally rolled the finished Sportster out of the shop, even Frank stopped to stare. The bike gleamed in the harsh sunlight, all clean lines and fresh chrome. It wasn't a custom showpiece, but it was clean, functional, and undeniably beautiful in its simplicity. "You got a gift, kid," Frank said, walking around the bike with an appraising eye. "A real gift. Shame to waste it hauling scrap." "I like hauling scrap," Lily said, though it wasn't entirely true. "Bullshit," Frank replied bluntly. "But that's okay. You're 14. You got time to figure out what you really want." What Lily really wanted, she was beginning to discover, was to ride. She started taking the Sportster out in the evenings first, just around Barstow, then venturing farther. She learned the desert roads, the hidden paths, the places where you could open the throttle and feel the engine's power translate into pure speed. She learned to read the wind, to feel weather changes in the way the bike handled. She learned to navigate by landmarks. That crooked Joshua tree meant the turnoff to the old mining road was a quarter-mile ahead. The abandoned gas station marked the halfway point to the state park. Riding became meditation, therapy, and education all rolled into one. On the bike, Lily could think clearly. She could process her complicated feelings about what had happened, about the men who'd given her this chance, about the ghost whose memory had saved her family. 3 months after the Hells Angels left Barstow, a postcard arrived at the trailer. It was addressed to Lily Morgan in neat masculine handwriting. The image on the front showed the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. Lily flipped it over, her heart pounding. The message was brief. "The bike sits in the place of honor. Your work lives on. Don't forget San Bernardino when the time comes." Iron. Lily ran her thumb over the words, feeling the indentations the pen had made in the cardstock. She carried the postcard to her room and pinned it to the wall above her bed, right next to a photo of her father on his motorcycle taken the year before he died. 2 weeks later, another visitor came to Coleman's scrapyard. Lily was in the shop, elbow deep in rebuilding a lawnmower engine that Frank wanted running, when she heard an unfamiliar car pull up outside. She wiped her hands on a rag and walked out to find a silver sedan parked by the office, expensive and out of place among the rust and decay. The woman who stepped out was in her early 60s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a simple bun and eyes the color of storm clouds. She wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. "I'm looking for Lily Morgan," the woman said, her voice steady and clear. "That's me," Lily replied cautiously, very aware of her grease-stained appearance. The woman studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something that caught the sunlight, a heavy silver ring with a winged skull. Lily's breath caught. "You're Margaret Blackwell," the woman confirmed. "But everyone calls me Maggie. I was Dutch's wife." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lily had imagined this meeting 100 times, rehearsed what she might say, but now that it was happening, all her prepared words fled. "I wanted to meet you," Maggie continued, her voice gentle. "Iron told me what you did, how you found Arthur's bike, how you brought it back to life, how you kept his ring safe." Her eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "I wanted to thank you." "I did know," Lily said quickly. "I did know it was his, not at first, and by the time I found the ring—" "You didn't sell it," Maggie interrupted. "You didn't throw it away. You kept it safe, and you gave it back." She held up the ring, letting it catch the light. "Do you know how much this means to me? For 12 years, I had nothing. No body to bury, no bike to mourn over, nothing but photographs and memories. The police said everything burned. I thought I'd never have anything of his to hold on to." She stepped closer to Lily, and Lily could see the tears spilling over, now tracking down Maggie's weathered cheeks. "You gave him back to me. Not all of him, but enough. Enough to finally have closure." Maggie reached out and pulled Lily into a hug. The teenager stiffened in surprise, then slowly relaxed, wrapping her arms around the older woman. They stood there in the dusty scrapyard, two people connected by a man neither of them had known they needed. When Maggie finally stepped back, she wiped her eyes and laughed shakily. "I'm sorry, I didn't come here to fall apart on you." "It's okay," Lily said softly. Maggie walked over to her car and leaned against it, looking out at the mountains of scrap metal. "Arthur would have loved what you did," she said. "He spent half his life in shops like this, building bikes, fixing them, making broken things run again. He would have been so damn proud of your work." "Iron said he was a good man," Lily offered. "He was," Maggie agreed. "He was also a complicated man. The club gave him brotherhood, purpose, belonging. But it also," she trailed off, choosing her words carefully, "it took from him too. It demanded things. Loyalty that sometimes meant crossing lines he wouldn't have crossed on his own." She turned to face Lily directly. "Iron told me he invited you to prospect when you turn 18. Lily nodded slowly. "He said to come to San Bernardino." "Are you going to go?" The question hung in the desert air. Lily thought about it, really thought about it, for the first time since Iron had made the offer. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to. They showed me respect when they didn't have to. They paid me when they could have just taken the bike. And working on motorcycles, it's the only thing I've ever been really good at." But Maggie prompted. "But I saw my mother's face when I told her about the Hells Angels," Lily continued. "I saw how scared she was, and I know what happened to my father." She met Maggie's eyes. "He died on a motorcycle. I was 6. My mom never told me the details, but I've wondered, was he in a club?" Maggie was quiet for a moment. "I don't know your father's story, honey, but I can tell you this. The club life isn't for everyone. It wasn't even really for Arthur, not deep down. He loved the bikes, loved the brotherhood, but the violence," she shook her head. "It wore on him. The last time I saw him, the night before the accident, he told me he was thinking about stepping back, maybe going nomad or even leaving altogether." "What happened?" Lily asked. "Iron said it was an accident, but—" "It was," Maggie said firmly. "At least as far as anyone knows. Arthur was riding alone late at night on a stretch of Route 66 that he'd ridden 1,000 times before. The state police said he lost control on a curve, went off the road, and hit a rock formation. The bike caught fire." She swallowed hard. "There were always rumors, rival clubs, internal disputes, but Iron investigated personally. If it had been anything but an accident, he would have found out." She reached out and squeezed Lily's shoulder. "What I'm trying to say is this. You have a gift, and you have an opportunity. But you also have a choice. The club will always be there. The question is whether it's where you belong. They talked for another hour, sitting on the hood of Maggie's car as the afternoon heat built around them. Maggie told stories about Dutch, how he proposed, how they'd built their first bike together, how he'd always kept a picture of her in his wallet, even though he'd never admit it to his brothers. In return, Lily talked about her own life, about her mother, about the grinding poverty, and the small victories. She showed Maggie the Sportster, and the older woman's face lit up with genuine appreciation. He would have loved this, Maggie said, running her hand over the fresh paint. Clean, functional, honest. That was Arthur's philosophy about bikes. He hated the guys who built show bikes they were afraid to ride. He said a motorcycle should be a tool, something you used, not a trophy you polished. When Maggie finally left, she pressed a business card into Lily's hand. That's my number. You ever need anything, advice, help, someone to talk to you, call me. Understand? Lily nodded, tucking the card carefully into her pocket. And Maggie paused by her car door. Whatever you decide about the club, don't let anyone rush you. You're 14. You've got 4 years before you even have to think seriously about it. Live those years, figure out who you are without the weight of someone else's expectations. Lily watched the silver sedan disappear down the highway, kicking up a thin trail of dust. She stood there for a long time, thinking about choices and futures and the strange path her life had taken. That night, she sat at the cramped kitchen table with her mother, eating dinner in comfortable silence. Sharon looked healthier than she had in years, her breathing easier, color back in her cheeks. The good medication was working. Mama, Lily said suddenly, "Did you ever want me to join Dad's world?" The motorcycle world. Sharon set down her fork, her expression complicated. Your father loved bikes more than almost anything, but they also killed him. She reached across the table and took Lily's hand. I want you to have choices, baby. Real choices. Not the ones desperation forced on us, but the kind you make because you want them. The Hells Angels want me to join, Lily said, when I turn 18. I know, Sharon squeezed her hand. And in 4 years, if that's what you want, I won't stop you. But Lily, you're so smart. You taught yourself mechanics. You brought a dead engine back to life. Imagine what you could do with an education with proper training. We can't afford. We can now, Sharon interrupted gently. With the money you earned, we have breathing room. I've been thinking maybe you could get your GED. Maybe look into community college. They have automotive programs, mechanical engineering programs. You could learn things that scrapyards can't teach you. Lily had never considered that possibility. In her world, education had always been an impossible luxury, something for other people's children. Just think about it, Sharon said. You don't have to decide anything tonight, but you have options now. That's all I want you to understand. You have options. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to fall and fall to winter. Lily kept working at Coleman's, kept learning, kept riding her Sportster whenever she could. But she also started studying for her GED, using books from the library and online resources when she could get internet access. Frank noticed the change in her, the way she asked more questions about the business side of the scrapyard, about metal prices and regulations and profit margins. He started teaching her things he'd never bothered to explain before, treating her less like cheap labor and more like a protege. You're thinking bigger than this place, Frank observed one day, watching her calculate the value of a copper load with practiced ease. Maybe, Lily admitted. Good, Frank said. I love this yard, but it's no place for someone with your potential. Hell, when I retire, this whole operation probably gets sold to some corporation that'll turn it into condos or some shit. He lit a cigarette, squinting through the smoke. But a mechanic with your skills, the world's your oyster, kid. 3 months after Maggie's visit, another letter arrived. This one was thicker, official looking. Lily opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a certificate of title for the Sportster, properly signed over to Lily Morgan. There was also a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Lily, the title should have been included with the bike, but I wanted to make sure it was done properly. The Sportster is yours legally and completely. No strings, no obligations. What you do with it and with your future is entirely your choice. If you need anything, you know where to find us. But if we never see you again, that's okay too. You earned your freedom. Use it wisely. Iron. Lily held the title in her hands, feeling the weight of what it represented. Legal ownership, freedom, the ability to sell it if she needed to register it, to truly make it hers. She thought about Dutch Blackwell, about the ghost who'd inadvertently saved her family. She thought about Iron and the Brotherhood, about the terrifying beauty of that show of force and honor. She thought about her mother breathing easier for the first time in years. And she thought about herself, 14 years old, scarred hands, a head full of mechanical knowledge, and a heart full of questions about where she belonged. The Sportster sat outside waiting patiently. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, full of roads she hadn't ridden yet, horizons she hadn't chased. Lily folded the title carefully and placed it in a drawer with her other important documents: birth certificate, social security card, the postcard from Iron. Then she grabbed her jacket and helmet and went outside. The Sportster started on the first try, as it always did now. The engine purred with a health that Lily had built with her own hands. She kicked it into gear and rode out into the desert evening, the sun painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. She didn't ride toward San Bernardino. She didn't ride toward any particular destination. She just rode, feeling the wind, the machine, the infinite possibility of the road ahead. For the first time in her life, Lily Morgan had choices, and she was going to take her time making them. The ghost of Dutch Blackwell rode with her that evening, an unseen presence in the desert wind. And if motorcycles could speak, hers might have whispered a simple truth. Sometimes the machines we rebuild end up rebuilding us. But Lily was just beginning to understand that. The real tests, the real choices were still ahead. And the Hells Angels of California were patient men. They could wait. 6 months passed like water through desert sand, leaving traces but changing the landscape. Lily turned 15 in February, a quiet affair with her mother and a small cake from the grocery store bakery. But the real gift had come weeks earlier, on a cold January morning, when she'd received her GED certificate in the mail. Sharon had cried, holding the certificate like it was made of gold. "Your father would be so proud," she'd whispered, and Lily had felt something shift in her chest, a weight she hadn't known she was carrying finally lifting. Frank Coleman's health had started failing that winter. A lifetime of cigarettes and desert dust had finally caught up with him, and he spent more days at home than at the yard. Lily found herself running Coleman's scrap almost single-handedly, making decisions about purchases, managing the crusher schedule, even dealing with the occasional difficult customer. The work was exhausting, but it taught her things no classroom ever could. She learned negotiation, learned to read. People learn when to stand firm and when to compromise. Her mechanical skills continued to sharpen. Every wrecked vehicle that came through the gates was a new puzzle to solve, a new system to understand. The Sportster had become an extension of herself. She'd logged over 3,000 miles on it, knew every quirk and vibration, could diagnose problems by sound alone. She'd started taking on side work, fixing bikes for people in Barstow and the surrounding towns. Word spread that the Morgan girl could resurrect damn near anything with an engine, and her reputation grew. The money helped. Sharon had been able to cut back to one shift at the diner, and her health had stabilized to the point where the daily fear of a fatal attack had receded. They'd moved out of the single wide into a small house on the edge of town, Nothing fancy, but it had solid walls and air conditioning that didn't sound like a dying animal. Life had found a rhythm, precarious but sustainable. Lily had almost convinced herself that the chapter with the Hells Angels was closed, a wild story to tell someday, but nothing more. Then the second letter arrived. It came on a Saturday in late March, delivered by regular mail, but marked with a return address that made Lily's hands shake. Oakland, Hells Angels, MC. The envelope was thick, substantial. Inside was a formal invitation printed on heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. You are cordially invited to attend the dedication ceremony for Arthur Dutch Blackwell, to be held at the Oakland Clubhouse on April 15th. Your presence would honor his memory and the Brotherhood. Travel expenses provided. RSVP enclosed. There was also a cashier's check for $500 marked travel expenses and a handwritten note from Iron. No pressure, but we'd like you there. Dutch's bike sits in the place of honor, and you're part of that story. Let us know, JC. Lily sat at the kitchen table reading and rereading the invitation. April 15th was 3 weeks away. Oakland was over 400 miles from Barstow, a 6-hour ride on the Sportster if she pushed it longer if she rode conservatively. Sharon found her there an hour later, still staring at the cardstock. What is it, baby? Lily showed her. Sharon read the invitation slowly, her face cycling through emotions Lily couldn't quite parse. When she finished, she set it down carefully and sat across from her daughter. Do you want to go? Sharon asked simply. I don't know, Lily admitted. Part of me does. They paid me respect, gave us a future. Dutch's bike, I spent 8 months on it. It feels like I should see it finished, see what it became. And the other part is scared, Lily said quietly. These are dangerous men, Mama. Going to their clubhouse, stepping into their world. What if they want more than I'm willing to give? Sharon reached across the table and took her daughter's scarred hands. Lily, you brought a dead engine back to life with scrap parts and stubbornness. You stood up to 300 bikers and walked away richer and respected. If you decide to go to Oakland, you'll be fine. And if you decide not to go, that's fine too. This is your choice. Lily thought about it for 3 days. She talked to Frank, who'd wheezed out a laugh, and said, Kid, you don't turn down an invitation from the Angels. That's just bad manners. She talked to Maggie Blackwell on the phone, and Dutch's widow had been encouraging. It would mean a lot to see you there, but only come if you want to, not out of obligation. Finally, Lily called the number on the RSVP card. A gruff voice answered. Oakland. This is Lily Morgan, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm calling about the invitation for April 15th. Hold. There was a pause, muffled conversation, then a different voice came on. Iron's voice, unmistakable even over the phone. Lily, glad you called. I'd like to come, Lily said. To the ceremony. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice. Ride or fly? Ride, Lily answered without hesitation. On the Sportster. Even better, you comfortable making that trip alone? Lily thought about the 3,000 miles she'd logged, the long desert rides, the confidence she'd built. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, makes me feel old. It's Iron, he paused. Listen, you'll be riding through some territory that can get sketchy. I'm going to arrange an escort for the last 100 miles Fresno to Oakland. Brothers from the Fresno charter will pick you up, ride you in safe. That okay? Okay, Lily agreed, feeling both relieved and nervous. Good. Send me your route and timeline. We'll make sure you're taken care of. And Lily, thank you for coming. It means something. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Lily gave the Sportster a complete inspection, replacing anything that looked even slightly worn. She plotted her route carefully. Highway 58 west to Bakersfield, then north on I-5 to Fresno, final leg to Oakland. She'd break the trip into 2 days camping one night rather than spending money on a hotel. Sharon helped her pack, worrying over every detail. Warm clothes for night, sunscreen for day, extra water, first aid kit, phone charger, cash hidden in 3 different places in case you get robbed. Mama, I'll be fine, Lily insisted, though she appreciated the care. The morning of April 13th dawned clear and cool, perfect riding weather. Lily loaded her camping gear and clothes into the Sportster's saddlebags, double-checked her tools and emergency supplies, and stood in front of the small house that had become home. Sharon wrapped her in a fierce hug. You call me every night, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you turn around and come home. You hear me? I hear you, Lily promised. And baby Sharon pulled back, looking her daughter in the eye. You're allowed to just observe. You don't owe them anything. You go, you pay your respects, you come home. That's enough. Lily nodded, swung her leg over the Sportster, and kicked it to life. The familiar rumble settled her nerves. She gave her mother one last wave and headed west toward the sunrise, painting the Mojave in shades of pink and gold. The first day's ride was glorious. Highway 58 cut through desert, gradually giving way to the southern end of the Central Valley. Lily stopped for gas in Mojave, grabbed lunch in Bakersfield, and made it to Fresno by late afternoon. She found a campground on the outskirts of the city, set up her small tent, and ate a cold dinner as the sun set. That night, lying in her sleeping bag and looking at the stars through the tent's mesh, Lily felt something she'd rarely experienced: possibility. She was traveling alone on a bike she'd rebuilt, going to meet people who respected her skills. Whatever happened in Oakland, this moment right here was freedom. The next morning, she broke camp early and rode to the gas station Iron had specified, a truck stop on the northern edge of Fresno. She was filling the Sportster's tank when she heard them coming. 5 motorcycles riding in tight formation, all wearing Hells Angels colors. They pulled up around her in a loose semicircle, engines idling. The lead rider, a massive black man with a completely bald head and a beard braided with silver beads, killed his engine and dismounted. You, Lily Morgan. His voice was surprisingly gentle, at odds with his intimidating appearance. Yes, sir. He grinned. Name's Terrence, but everyone calls me Tiny. And yeah, I know, ironic. He gestured to the other riders. This is Marcus Jim Bob Eduardo, and that ugly bastard on the end is Copper. We're your escort to Oakland. Lily relaxed slightly. Thank you for coming. Iron's orders, Tiny said with a shrug. But also, we wanted to meet the kid who impressed the old man. He doesn't impress easy. He walked around the Sportster, examining it with an expert eye. You did this rebuild yourself? Yes. Paint job? Me. Carburetor work, engine timing? All me. Tiny let out a low whistle. Iron wasn't exaggerating. You got skills, little sister. He swung back onto his bike. Okay, here's how this works. You ride in the middle of our formation. We keep you safe, make sure no one hassles you. It's about 90 miles to Oakland, 2 hours at highway speed. You need to stop for any reason. You signal, and we all stop. Questions? No, sir, I mean Tiny. Good, let's roll. Riding in formation with the Hells Angels was unlike anything Lily had experienced. They moved like a single organism, spacing precise hand signals, crisp and clear. Cars on the interstate gave them wide berth, some drivers even pulling onto the shoulder entirely to let them pass. Lily felt both protected and exposed, aware that everyone who saw this formation would see her in the middle and make assumptions. But she also felt the thrill of it, the sheer power of moving as part of a group, the way the road opened up before them. They stopped once for gas, and Tiny bought her a coffee despite her protests. You're our guest, he said firmly. Iron would skin us if we let you pay for anything. As they neared Oakland, the landscape changed. Urban sprawl replaced farmland, traffic thickened. The air took on the taste of ocean salt mixing with city exhaust. Tiny led them off the interstate and through a maze of surface streets, finally turning down a road that seemed to lead nowhere. Then Lily saw it. The Oakland Hells Angels Clubhouse. It was a fortress, a squat concrete building surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire. Security cameras were visible at every corner. The gate was heavy steel manned by two prospects who straightened when they saw Tiny's formation approaching. The gate swung open and they rode into a large courtyard. Motorcycles were parked in precise rows, easily 50 of them, maybe more. Men stood in small groups, all wearing the familiar death's head patch, all turning to watch as Tiny's group entered. Lily's heart hammered as she followed Tiny to a parking spot. She killed the engine and dismounted, very aware that every eye in the courtyard was on her. Then Iron emerged from the main building, and the crowd parted for him automatically. He'd aged slightly in the 6 months since Barstow, a few more lines around his eyes, but he still moved with that same commanding presence. Lily Morgan Iron said, a genuine smile crossing his weathered face. "Welcome to Oakland." He extended his hand and Lily shook it, feeling the callous strength in his grip. "Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for making the ride." Iron gestured to the building. "Come on, let me show you what you helped create." The interior of the clubhouse was darker, cooler, thick with the smell of leather and motor oil and cigarette smoke. The walls were covered with photographs spanning decades, men on bikes, men in bars, memorial photos with black ribbons in the corners. Iron led her through a common room where several members sat drinking beer and playing cards. They nodded respectfully as she passed, down a hallway past what looked like a chapel of some kind, and finally into a large room that felt sacred. The room was circular with a massive wooden table in the center. Chairs surrounded it, each one bearing a name plaque. And in the very center of that table, elevated on a custom-built stand, sat Dutch Blackwell's Harley. Lily stopped breathing. It had been transformed. The bike she'd resurrected from dirt and rust now gleamed like a jewel. The dents she'd hammered out had been professionally finished, the metal smooth as glass. The scorch marks she'd hidden under primer had been incorporated into an elaborate paint job, flames that seemed to dance across the tank, red and orange and gold, against a deep black background. The chrome shone like mirrors. The leather seat had been replaced with tooled leather bearing and intricate death's head design. The exhaust pipes, Dutch's custom welds, had been polished to a brilliant shine, but left unaltered, a tribute to the original builder. But what struck Lily most was the care evident in every detail. This wasn't just restoration, this was reverence. "Jesus," Lily whispered. "Brother Marcus did the paintwork," Iron said quietly, standing beside her. "Took him 2 months to get it right. Brother Jimmy did the leather. Everyone who touched this bike did it for free as tribute." He walked around to the front of the table, gesturing for Lily to follow. Mounted on the wall behind the bike was a photograph, Dutch Blackwell, in his prime, probably in his 30s, sitting on this very motorcycle. He was grinning at the camera, one hand raised in a casual salute, the wind catching his dark hair. Below the photograph was a plaque. "Arthur Dutch Blackwell, 1960 to 2014, Brother Warrior Legend, resurrected by Lily Morgan, 2026. Forever." In the center of the table, Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "I didn't do this," she said, gesturing to the gleaming machine. "I just got the engine running." "You did more than that," Iron said. "You brought him home. Everything else was just us finishing what you started." He put a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we're having a ceremony. Maggie will be here, Dutch's old brothers, chapter presidents from all over. We're officially dedicating this memorial, and we want you to speak." Lily's head snapped up. "Speak? I can't. I didn't know him." "You knew his bike," Iron interrupted gently. "You spent 8 months learning every inch of it. You bled for it. That's a kind of knowing that matters. You don't have to make a speech. Just say a few words about the work, about what it meant. Can you do them?" Lily looked at the Harley gleaming in its place of honor. She thought about those 8 months, the frustration and triumph, the nights she'd cried over seized bolts, and the morning the engine had roared to life. She thought about the ghost who'd saved her family without ever knowing it. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll try." Iron squeezed her shoulder. That's all anyone can ask. He led her back out of the memorial room and through the clubhouse. "You'll stay in one of our guest rooms tonight. Bathrooms down the hall, kitchen's always open if you get hungry. Ceremony starts at noon tomorrow. Until then, you're free to explore, meet people, whatever you want. Just stay out of the chapel unless invited, and don't go into any room with a closed door." He showed her to a small but clean room with a single bed and a window that looked out on the courtyard. "Get some rest. I know it's a lot to take in." After Iron left, Lily sat on the bed trying to process everything. She was inside a Hells Angels clubhouse surrounded by men whose reputation preceded them, about to speak at a memorial for someone she'd never met. The surreal nature of her life hit her all over again. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. Sharon answered on the first ring. "I made it to Oakland," Lily said. "I'm okay." The relief in Sharon's voice was palpable. "Thank God. Tell me everything." Lily described the ride, the escort, the clubhouse, and finally the memorial room and Dutch's restored Harley. As she talked, she heard her mother's breathing catch. "Your father would have understood this," Sharon said softly. "This kind of brotherhood, this kind of tribute. It's what he was looking for before she trailed off." "Before what, Mama?" Sharon was quiet for a long moment. "Before the club he was in turned on him. But that's a story for when you get home. Just be careful, baby. Brotherhood is beautiful, but it always has a price." They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. Lily lay back on the bed, her mind racing too fast for sleep. Through the window, she could hear the rumble of motorcycles, the low murmur of male voices, occasional laughter. This was a world unto itself, operating by rules she only partially understood. And for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, she wanted to understand it better. The next morning, Lily woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She followed her nose to the clubhouse kitchen, where several members were cooking breakfast on industrial-sized griddles. A man with a gray ponytail and kind eyes handed her a plate without being asked. "Eat," he said simply. "Ceremony's not for 3 hours, but you'll need your strength." Lily ate in the common room, watching the clubhouse come to life around her. More members arrived, along with women, old ladies, yevatas, girlfriends, all dressed respectfully in black. The atmosphere was solemn but not oppressive, more like a family gathering before a funeral. Maggie Blackwell arrived mid-morning, and Lily felt relief at seeing a familiar face. Maggie hugged her tightly. "I'm so glad you came. Arthur would have loved knowing you were here." "I'm nervous about speaking," Lily admitted. "Just speak from the heart," Maggie said. "That's all anyone wants." By noon, the courtyard was packed. Lily counted easily 200 people, maybe more. Chapter presidents from across California, Nevada, even a few from Arizona, all wearing their colors, all standing in respectful silence as Iron took his place at a makeshift podium. The ceremony was surprisingly formal. Iron spoke first, recounting Dutch's history with the club, his legendary rides, his acts of courage and brotherhood. Other members spoke, sharing stories that made people laugh and cry in equal measure. Then it was Maggie's turn. She spoke about the man she'd loved, the husband who died too young, the empty years without closure. When she mentioned the ring, her voice broke. "For 12 years I had nothing to hold," Maggie said. "Then a 14-year-old girl gave me back a piece of my husband. She didn't have to. She could have kept it, sold it, thrown it away. But she kept it safe and she gave it back." She looked directly at Lily. "That kind of integrity is rare. Arthur would have recognized it, would have respected David. I think in a way he sent her that bike, sent it to someone who would appreciate what it meant to build something with your own hands." Then Iron called Lily forward, and her legs felt like water as she walked to the podium. 200 faces watched her waiting. Lily gripped the edges of the podium, her prepared words evaporating from her mind. She looked out at the crowd, at Iron's encouraging nod, at Maggie's warm smile, at the expectant faces of men who'd loved Dutch Blackwell. I never met Arthur Blackwell, Lily began, her voice shaking. I was 6 years old when he died living in Barstow, and I didn't know anything about motorcycles or clubs or Brotherhood. She took a breath, steadying herself. When I found his bike in that scrapyard, it was just metal to me. Broken metal that I thought maybe I could fix and sell to help my mom pay medical bills. I didn't know it had a soul. I didn't know someone had built it with their own hands, had ridden it thousands of miles, had loved it. The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. It took me 8 months to bring it back. There were nights I cried because I couldn't get a bolt loose. Mornings I thought about giving up because the work was too hard. But something kept pulling me back to that bike. It wanted to live. I felt that even though it sounds crazy. She looked toward the clubhouse where Dutch's Harley sat in its place of honor. When I finally got the engine running, it was the best sound I'd ever heard. It felt like resurrection, like I'd done something impossible. I didn't know then that I was bringing someone home. I just knew I'd saved something beautiful. Lily's eyes found Maggie. I'm sorry I didn't know him, but I knew his work. I knew the welds he made, the modifications he chose, the care he put into every detail. That bike was built by someone who understood machines, who respected them. Working on it taught me what it means to build something that lasts. She paused, choosing her final words carefully. Arthur Blackwell gave me more than I can ever repay. His bike saved my family. His ring gave Mrs. Blackwell closure. And his memory brought me here to understand what brotherhood really means. I hope I honored his work. I hope he would have been proud of what I did. Lily stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Iron started clapping, slow and deliberate. One by one, the entire assembly joined in until the applause was thunderous, echoing off the clubhouse walls. Some of the older members were wiping their eyes, and Lily saw more than one patch member nodding in approval. When the ceremony concluded, people lined up to shake Lily's hand, to thank her, to tell her she'd done Dutch proud. It was overwhelming, this outpouring of respect from men who gave respect rarely and grudgingly. Bobby Chains Rourke, the enforcer who'd seemed ready to hurt her in Barstow, approached with an unreadable expression. Lily tensed, but Chains just extended his hand. "You got heart, kid," he said gruffly. "I didn't see it back in Barstow. I was wrong. Dutch would have liked you." It was as close to an apology as Lily suspected she'd ever get from him, and she took it. As the crowd began to disperse, Iron pulled Lily aside. "Walk with me." They left the courtyard and walked around the perimeter of the clubhouse property. The sun was beginning to set, painting Oakland in shades of orange and purple. "You did good today," Iron said. "Really good, but I didn't bring you here just for the ceremony." Lily's stomach tightened. No. Iron stopped, turning to face her. "I brought you here because I wanted you to see this world. Really see it, not just the scary moment in a scrapyard. I wanted you to see the brotherhood, the tradition, the loyalty. Because in 4 years that offer I made stands, but only if it's what you really want." He leaned against the fence, studying her. "You're 15 now. Smart, skilled, strong. You could go a lot of directions with your life. You could stay in Barstow, take over Coleman's eventually. You could go to college, become an engineer, build bikes for corporations. Or you could join us, become part of something bigger than yourself." "What would that mean?" Lily asked. "Joining, I mean. Really?" Iron considered his answer carefully. "It means family. It means brothers who die for you and who you'd die for. It means always having a place to belong, people who understand you. It means working in our shops, building and fixing bikes, being part of a legacy that goes back decades." And the other part Lily pressed, the dangerous part. Iron didn't insult her by pretending not to understand. It means enemies, other clubs who see us as rivals, law enforcement who see us as criminals. It means sometimes you have to do things you wouldn't choose to do because the club needs it. It means your loyalty is tested often in ways you won't like. He met her eyes directly. I won't lie to you, Lily. This life has costs. Dutch paid the ultimate one. Others have paid with prison time, with injuries, with relationships that couldn't survive the pressure. It's not romance, it's work and sacrifice and sometimes violence. Then why do you stay? Lily asked. Iron smiled, a genuine expression that softened his hard features. Because the brothers I've made here are the only family I've ever really had. Because working on bikes with people who understand them the way I do is the purest joy I know. Because when I'm riding in formation, 300 brothers around me, I feel connected to something eternal. The costs are real, but so are the rewards. He straightened. You don't have to decide anything now. Hell, you don't have to decide anything when you turn 18. But I want you to have all the information. The good and the bad. Can you handle that? Yes, Lily said, her voice steady. Good. Then tomorrow, before you ride home, I'm going to show you some things. The shop, the garage, the business side of what we do. I want you to see what your days would look like if you chose this path. Fair. Fair. They walked back to the clubhouse as darkness fell. A party was starting, the members and old ladies gathering in the common room, music starting up, beer flowing freely. Maggie found Lily and pulled her into conversations, introducing her to people, making sure she felt included. But around midnight, Lily slipped away to her guest room. She was overwhelmed, emotionally exhausted from the ceremony and Iron's heavy conversation. She sat on the bed and called her mother. How was it? Sharon asked. Intense, Lily admitted. She described the ceremony, her speech, the reaction. Mama, they really loved him. It wasn't just talk. These hard, scary men were crying over a brother they lost 12 years ago. That's the power of real brotherhood, Sharon said softly. Your father felt that too before she trailed off again. Before what Lily demanded. You keep starting that story and not finishing it. Sharon sighed deeply. When you get home, baby, it's not a story for the phone, but I think you need to hear it before you make any decisions about your future. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Lily lay in the dark, listening to the party continuing below, thinking about choices and futures and the weight of belonging. The next morning, Iron made good on his promise. After breakfast, he took Lily to the club's main garage, a massive warehouse space filled with lifts, tools, and motorcycles in various states of repair. This is where the real work happens, Iron explained. We build custom bikes for clients, do restoration work, handle repairs for club members. It's legitimate business, pays well, and it's how a lot of brothers make their living. He introduced her to the mechanics working there, skilled men who spoke the language of engines and metal that Lily understood fluently. They showed her current projects, a complete custom build for a lawyer in San Francisco, a vintage restoration of a 1940s Indian routine maintenance on club bikes. You'd work here, Iron said. Learn from masters, eventually take on your own projects. We'd pay for any training you needed, technical certifications, welding classes, whatever would make you better at the craft. He showed her the financial side too, the invoices and accounts, the legitimate business operations that funded much of the club's activities. It was eye-opening. This wasn't just outlaws playing with motorcycles. It was a functioning enterprise. But then Iron showed her the other side. In a private office, he pulled out a thick folder. This is what we don't talk about outside these walls. This is the key to. The folder contained police reports, arrest records, photographs of injured brothers, news clippings about club violence. Iron made her read through it, not sparing her the harsh realities. This brother lost 3 years to federal prison on a weapons charge. This one took a knife in a bar fight with a rival club. This one's in a wheelchair because a car deliberately ran him off the road. This is what the other side looks like. Lily studied the documents, feeling her stomach churn. These weren't abstract dangers. They were real consequences suffered by real people. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because I respect you too much to bullshit you," Iron said bluntly. "A lot of clubs they recruit with promises of brotherhood and freedom and leave out the blood and prison time. I won't do that to you. You're smart, you're skilled, and you could have a future with us. But only if you walk in with your eyes open." He closed the folder. "Some of our brothers joined young and regretted it. Some joined old and wished they'd done it sooner. There's no right answer, Lily. There's only what's right for you." They spent the rest of the morning in the garage, and Iron let Lily work on a carburetor rebuild alongside one of the senior mechanics. It felt good, familiar, like coming home to something she understood. The mechanic, a Vietnam veteran named Carl, was impressed with her skills. "Girl's got surgeon hands," Carl told Iron. "Haven't seen natural talent like this in years." Around noon, Iron walked Lily back to the courtyard where the Sportster waited. Tiny and his crew were there ready to escort her back to Fresno. Maggie appeared to say goodbye, hugging Lily tightly. "Whatever you decide about the club, you stay in touch with me," she said firmly. "You're not just some kid who found a bike anymore. You're family." Iron shook her hand one last time. "Ride safe. Think about what you saw here." And Lily, "Don't let anyone pressure you into a decision. Not me, not your mother, not anyone. This is your life. You choose how to live it." Lily swung onto the Sportster, the familiar weight and rumble settling her nerves. She followed Tiny's formation out of the courtyard through Oakland streets and back onto the interstate. The ride to Fresno was quieter than the ride up, each person lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the agreed-upon stopping point, Tiny pulled over and the formation broke. "You good from here?" he asked Lily. "Yeah, thank you, all of you." Tiny nodded. "Anytime, little sister. You need anything, you call the Fresno Charter. We got your back." Lily rode the rest of the way to Barstow alone, grateful for the solitude to process everything she'd experienced. The desert landscape felt like an old friend welcoming her home, familiar and uncomplicated. She pulled into Barstow as the sun was setting, painting her small town in the same amber light that had seen her leave 2 days earlier. But she felt different, changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. Sharon was waiting on the porch when Lily pulled up. She rushed down to embrace her daughter, holding on tight. "Tell me everything," Sharon said. Inside over dinner, Lily recounted the entire trip. The ceremony, the speeches, the garage, the folder of harsh realities. Sharon listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled as the story progressed. When Lily finished, Sharon stood and went to her bedroom. She returned carrying a small wooden box that Lily had never seen before. "I think it's time I told you about your father," Sharon said quietly. "The whole truth." Sharon set the wooden box on the table between them, her hands trembling slightly. Lily had never seen this box before, had never known it existed in their small house. "Your father's name was Daniel Morgan," Sharon began, her voice steady but weighted with old pain. "You know that part. What you don't know is that before he met me, he was in a motorcycle club. Not the Hells Angels, a smaller outfit called the Desert Riders. They operated out of Victorville, ran territory from there to Needles." She opened the box, pulling out a faded photograph. A young man, maybe 25, sat on a chopper with his arm around a younger version of Sharon. He was handsome with dark hair and Lily's same sharp jawline. And he was wearing a vest with patches. Lily recognized the bottom rocker read, "Desert Riders MC." "He joined when he was 19, Sharon continued. "It was everything to him. The brotherhood, the bikes, the sense of belonging. His own family had kicked him out for being too wild, and the club became his family. Lily studied the photo, seeing her father truly for the first time. What happened? Sharon pulled out more items from the box, newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle. The Desert Riders had a rivalry with another club, the Scorpions. Territory dispute, pride, the usual stupid reasons men find to hurt each other. It escalated over months. First, it was just words, threats. Then someone from the Scorpions vandalized the Desert Riders clubhouse. Then a scorpion got jumped outside a bar. She laid out the clippings and Lily saw the headlines. Motorcycle gang violence escalates in High Desert 3. Hospitalized in bar brawl, police investigate club shooting. Your father was in deep by then, Sharon said, her voice cracking. He'd met me, we were dating, but the club came first. It always came first. He was there the night things went truly bad, a meeting between the two clubs that was supposed to settle things peacefully. Instead, someone pulled a gun. When it was over, 2 Scorpions were dead and 3 Desert Riders were wounded. Lily felt ice in her stomach. Was Dad? He didn't pull the trigger, Sharon said quickly. But he was there. He was complicit. And he knew if he stayed, if he testified, if he cooperated with police, he'd be looking at accessory charges, at minimum murder charges at worst. She pulled out another document, a bus ticket dated 23 years ago. He ran. Left the club in the middle of the night, didn't tell anyone where he was going, just grabbed me, and we ran to Barstow, changed our names, started over. He swore he was done with club life forever. But he still rode, Lily said, remembering the few stories her mother had told over the years. He still rode, Sharon confirmed. He couldn't help himself. Motorcycles were in his blood. He'd buy cheap bikes, fix them up, ride them for a few months, then sell them and start over. It was his way of staying connected to the life he'd left without the danger of the club. Sharon's hands tightened on the edge of the table. But you can't really leave that world, Lily. Not completely. 6 years after we came to Barstow, someone recognized him at a gas station in Victorville. Word got back to what was left of the Desert Riders. They sent 2 members to find him. Lily's breath caught. The accident? Wasn't an accident, Sharon said, tears spilling over now. They ran him off the road on Route 66, same stretch where Arthur Blackwell died years later. The police called it a single vehicle crash, loss of control on a curve. But I knew better. I saw the paint transfer on his bike, the marks that showed contact. They killed him, Lily. His brothers killed him for running. The room swam in Lily's vision. Everything she'd believed about her father's death, the sanitized version she'd carried for 9 years, shattered and reformed into something darker and more terrible. Why didn't you tell me? Lily whispered. Because you were 6 years old and you'd just lost your father, Sharon said fiercely. What was I supposed to say? That the motorcycle club he'd loved had murdered him. That Brotherhood had a knife edge and he'd fallen on the wrong side of it. She reached across and gripped Lily's hands. And later, when you started showing the same love for motorcycles, the same talent for fixing them, I was terrified. I saw Daniel and you saw that same obsession, and I was afraid you'd end up the same way. Sharon took a shuddering breath. When the Hells Angels showed up in Barstow, when I saw 300 of them surrounding my daughter, I thought I was watching history repeat itself. I thought I'd lose you the way I lost him. Lily sat in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. Her father hadn't been the casual rider her mother had portrayed. He'd been deep in club life, had witnessed murder, had run from his brothers, and had paid for it with his life. Is that why you didn't stop me from working on Dutch's bike? Lily asked. Even though you were scared. I couldn't stop you any more than I could stop, Daniel, Sharon admitted. The Morgan stubbornness runs deep. But I hoped you'd learn what you needed to learn and walk away before it cost you everything. She pulled out the last item from the box, a folded letter, the paper soft with age. Your father wrote this 2 days before he died. He never mailed it, but I found it in his shop. I think he knew they were coming for him. Lily took the letter with shaking hands and unfolded it. Her father's handwriting was angular and masculine, the letters pressed deep into the paper. Sharon, if you're reading this, then my past caught up with me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for dragging you into my mess. Sorry for leaving you alone. Sorry for whatever our child will grow up without. I thought I could outrun what I'd done, but you can't outrun Brotherhood. It finds you. It always finds you. The club gave me everything, purpose, family, belonging. But it also demanded everything. And when I couldn't give it anymore, when I chose you and our baby over the patch, I became a traitor. There's no forgiveness for that. No statute of limitations. I don't regret leaving. I regret that leaving wasn't enough to keep you safe. Tell our kid about the good parts of who I was. Tell them I love motorcycles because they meant freedom, and I love them because they were you and them wrapped together. Don't let them hate the things I loved. Just teach them to be smarter than I was. Teach them that some families will kill you for the crime of wanting something different. I love you. I'm sorry, Daniel. Lily read it 3 times, tears falling onto the paper and smudging ink that was already faded with age. She understood now why her mother had been so afraid, why Sharon had reacted with such terror when the Hells Angels arrived. I'm not Dad, Lily said finally, her voice hoarse. I know, Sharon said. You're stronger than he was smarter. But Lily, the pattern is the same. They're offering you exactly what they offered him, belonging, purpose, family. And I can't stop you from taking it any more than I could stop him. All I can do is beg you to see the whole picture before you choose. They sat together in the small kitchen for a long time, the letter and the photographs and the newspaper clippings spread between them like evidence at a trial. Finally, Lily gathered everything carefully and placed it back in the wooden box. Thank you for telling me, she said. I needed to know. What are you going to do, Sharon asked. I don't know yet, Lily admitted, but I'll be careful, I promise. Over the next 3 months, Lily threw herself into work and thinking. Frank Coleman's health continued to decline, and by late July he made the decision to sell the scrapyard. But instead of selling to a corporation, he offered it to Lily. I can't afford, Lily started to protest. Seller financing. Frank interrupted, coughing wetly. You pay me a percentage of profits monthly until the purchase price is covered. It'll take you maybe 10 years, but the place will be yours. Better than watching some suits turn it into condos. It was an impossible opportunity, the kind that should have felt like a gift. But Lily found herself hesitating. Buying the scrapyard meant committing to Barstow, to this life, to a future she could see stretching out in predictable decades. She asked for time to think about it. That same week, another letter arrived from Oakland. This one was from Carl, the Vietnam vet mechanic she'd met. Lily Iron mentioned you might be interested in formal training. The Bay Area has a technical college with one of the best motorcycle mechanics programs in the country. 2-year degree, job placement after. We could set you up with housing cover, tuition as a club scholarship. No strings, you don't have to prospect or join. Just an investment in talent we believe in. Let me know if you're interested. Carl. Lily stared at the letter, then at Frank's offer, then at her mother's worried face. 3 paths, 3 completely different futures. She made a decision she hadn't known she was capable of making. I need to go somewhere, Lily told her mother. Just for a few days. There's something I need to do. She packed light, threw her camping gear on the Sportster, and headed east instead of west. Not toward Oakland, but toward Victorville, toward her father's past. It took her 2 days to find what she was looking for, the remnants of the Desert Riders Motorcycle Club. The clubhouse was abandoned now. Windows boarded up, graffiti covering the walls. The bar where the fatal shooting had happened was under new ownership, sanitized of its violent history. But Lily found one former member working at a motorcycle shop on the edge of town. His name was Rodriguez, and he was in his late 50s now, with gray in his beard and prison tattoos fading on his arms. I'm looking for information about Daniel Morgan, Lily said, watching his face carefully. Rodriguez's expression shuddered immediately. Don't know the name. He was a desert rider 23 years ago. He was there the night 2 scorpions got killed. You a cop? I'm his daughter. Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Come on back. In the shop's break room, Rodriguez lit a cigarette despite the no smoking signs and studied Lily with tired eyes. Your dad was a good rider, good mechanic. Got in with the wrong club at the wrong time. Did you know him well? Well enough. Rodriguez exhaled smoke. The night the shooting happened, Daniel wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd been trying to distance himself, everyone knew it. He'd met a girl who was talking about leaving. But the club president ordered everyone to show for the meet. You don't refuse an order like that. What happened? What always happens when too many young men with too much pride and too many weapons get together. Someone said something disrespectful. Someone else took it personally. Guns came out. By the time it was over, 2 people were dead and the desert riders were finished. Feds came down hard, arrested half the chapter. Rodriguez tapped ash into an empty soda can. Daniel ran before they could get him. Smart move probably, but the ones who went to prison blamed him. Said he was a coward, a deserter. When they got out 6 years later, they decided to settle accounts. So they killed him, Lily said flatly. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. I was in Corcoran when it happened, but I heard about it. 2 brothers tracked him to Barstow, waited for him on Route 66. It was meant to look like an accident. Did anyone pay for it? Kid, nobody paid for anything except the families left behind. The 2 who did it are both dead now. One from an overdose, one from hepatitis he caught in county. The desert riders don't exist anymore. It's all just ghosts and regrets. He stubbed out his cigarette. Why are you digging this up now? Because I need to understand, Lily said. I need to know if Brotherhood is worth what it costs. Rodriguez laughed a bitter sound. That's a question every person has to answer for themselves. For me, it wasn't. I gave 20 years to clubs lost. My marriage did 2 prison bids and ended up working in a shop for minimum wage. But I had brothers who'd say they'd do it all again, that the club gave their lives meaning. He leaned forward. Your dad made his choice when he ran. He chose you and your mom over the patch. That took guts and it cost him. But he died knowing he'd done the right thing. Can you say the same about the ones who killed him? Lily left Victorville that afternoon with more questions than answers, but with something she hadn't had before: context. Her father's story wasn't a simple tragedy. It was a choice made consciously with full knowledge of the consequences. She rode back to Barstow, slowly thinking hard. By the time she pulled into her driveway, she'd made a decision. The next morning, Lily called 3 numbers. First, she called Frank Coleman and accepted his offer to buy the scrapyard, with one condition: she wanted the option to sell it later without penalty if her circumstances changed. Frank agreed. Second, she called Carl in Oakland and accepted the technical college scholarship but declined the housing. She'd commute from Barstow, keeping 1 foot in each world. Third, she called Iron Callahan directly. I've been thinking about your offer, Lily said without preamble. I'm not ready to give you an answer about prospecting, but I'd like to stay connected, keep learning, maybe work in the Oakland garage during summers. Would that be possible? There was a long pause, then Iron chuckled. Kid, you just asked for exactly the kind of arrangement I was hoping you'd want. Yeah, that works. You stay independent, learn the craft, figure out who you are. When you turn 18, if you want to prospect, the door's open. If you don't, no hard feelings. Why would you agree to that? Lily asked. Why invest in me if I might never join? Because you're talented, and talent should be nurtured, whether it serves the club or not, Iron said simply. And because Dutch would have wanted it this way, he believed in building people up, not using them up. Thank you, Lily said quietly. Don't thank me. Just don't waste the opportunity. The next 2 years unfolded like a complex engine assembly, many parts moving simultaneously, each essential to the whole. Lily bought Coleman Scrap and renamed it Morgan's Salvage and Restoration. She kept the scrap business running, but added a restoration shop, taking on custom projects that let her flex her creative muscles. Word spread, and soon she was getting calls from across the Southwest. She enrolled in the technical college program, making the 4-hour ride to the Bay Area twice a week for classes. The education was revelatory. She'd learned mechanics through trial and error. But now she understood the theory behind it, the engineering principles, the physics of combustion and torque and stress tolerances. During summer breaks, she worked in the Oakland garage under Carl's mentorship. She learned custom fabrication, advanced welding engine blueprinting techniques that few mechanics her age had access to. She also learned the culture of the Hells Angels, not as an outsider, but as someone adjacent to it. She saw the genuine brotherhood, the way members took care of each other's families when someone was in prison or injured. She saw the charity rides, the Toys for Tots runs, the ways the club gave back to communities. But she also saw the darker sides, the fights, the territorial, posturing, the members who disappeared into federal custody, the funerals for brothers who died violently. Maggie Blackwell became something like an aunt to Lily, checking in regularly, offering advice, telling stories about Dutch that helped Lily understand the man whose bike had changed her life. Through Maggie, Lily learned about the price that old ladies paid to fear every time their man rode out, the knowledge that the club would always come first, the strength required to love someone who belonged to something bigger and more demanding than a family. Sharon's health continued to improve, stabilized by good medication and reduced stress. She'd expanded her small cafe into a proper restaurant, and it was thriving. She watched her daughter navigate these complicated waters with a mixture of pride and lingering fear, but she learned to trust Lily's judgment. On Lily's 18th birthday, Iron sent a simple message. The offer stands. No pressure. Ride safe. Lily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a long ride out to Route 66 to the stretch of highway where both Dutch Blackwell and her father had died. There were 2 memorial markers, now small roadside crosses that people had erected over the years. She sat between them, her back against the Sportster, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. She thought about the 2 men she'd never met, both killed by the things they'd loved. She thought about the choices they'd made, the prices they'd paid, the legacies they'd left. I'm not going to join, Lily said aloud to their ghosts. Not because I don't respect what you had, but because I think there's another way. I can honor the craft, honor the brotherhood without wearing the patch. I can build the bikes without living the life. The desert wind carried her words away, offering no judgment, no approval, just the eternal indifference of the Mojave. Lily pulled out her phone and sent a message to Iron. Thank you for everything you have taught me and the opportunities you've given me. I'm honored by the invitation to prospect, but I'm going to decline. I want to build my own path, my own shop, my own legacy. I hope we can still work together, still be friends, but I need to do this on my own terms. The response came within minutes. Understood and respected. The garage always has work for you if you want it. And Lily, your dad and Dutch would both be proud of the woman you've become. Ride free. That night, Lily sat with her mother on the porch of their house, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. I'm not joining the Hells Angels, Lily announced. Sharon's relief was palpable, visible in the way her shoulders relaxed. I'm glad, but what will you do? Keep building Morgans. Keep learning. Eventually, I want to open a full custom shop, build bikes that people remember. I want to be known as the best mechanic in the Southwest, maybe in the country, on my own merit, not because of any patch I wear. That's a big dream, Sharon said softly. I've already done impossible things, Lily replied. I brought a dead engine back to life. I faced down 300 Hell's Angels and earned their respect. I built a business from a failing scrapyard. Why can't I build the best custom shop in America? Sharon smiled, tears glittering in her eyes. No reason at all, baby. No reason at all. 5 years later, Morgan's Custom Motorcycles occupied a 5,000 square foot facility on the outskirts of Barstow. The walls were covered with photographs of completed builds, magazine features, and award certificates from custom bike shows. Lily employed 4 full-time mechanics and had a waiting list that stretched 18 months. At 23, she'd become exactly what she'd envisioned, one of the most respected custom builders in the Southwest. Her bikes appeared in magazines, won awards at Sturgis and Daytona, commanded prices that would have seemed impossible to her teenage self. She'd built bikes for celebrities, for executives, for collectors, but her favorite projects were still the resurrection jobs, taking broken, discarded machines and bringing them back to life. The Hells Angels remained friends and occasional clients. Iron had commissioned 3 custom builds from her, paying top dollar and giving her complete creative freedom. Other club members sent work her way, and Lily always gave them fair prices and priority treatment. The relationship was respectful, professional, and boundaried. Maggie Blackwell visited regularly, often bringing photographs of Dutch on his restored Harley, which still sat in the center of the Oakland clubhouse table. You gave him the best memorial anyone could ask for, Maggie would say. Not just the bike, but the way you honored his craft by becoming a master yourself. Sharon had retired from the restaurant, her health finally stable enough to enjoy life without constant work. She spent her days gardening, volunteering, and telling everyone who'd listen about her brilliant daughter who'd built an empire from a scrapyard. The Sportster that Iron had given Lily 7 years ago still sat in her personal garage, now heavily customized, but still fundamentally the same bike. She rode it regularly, keeping the memory of where she'd come from alive. On the 7th anniversary of the day the Hells Angels had arrived in Barstow, Lily stood in her shop looking at her latest project, a complete custom build commissioned by a tech executive from San Francisco. It was a masterpiece, if she said so herself, with hand-fabricated parts, custom paint, and an engine she'd built from the block up. But sitting next to it, covered with a tarp, was a personal project. Lily pulled the tarp away, revealing a work in progress that she'd been building for 3 years. It was a tribute bike, built on the same frame geometry as Dutch Blackwell's Dyna, with the same style of custom exhaust, but entirely her own creation. The tank bore artwork as she'd designed herself, not a death's head, but a phoenix rising from flames built from mechanical parts. It represented resurrection, transformation, the way broken things could become beautiful again. The build was nearly complete. Just a few more weeks of work, and it would be ready to ride. Lily's phone rang. Unknown number, Oakland area code. Morgan's Custom, she answered professionally. Lily, it's Carl. I'm calling with sad news. Her heart sank. Passed this morning. Heart attack, quick and clean. He was working on a bike in the garage, which is how he would have wanted it. Lily sat down heavily, grief washing over her. Iron had been a constant presence in her life since that terrifying day in the scrapyard. Mentor, friend, the bridge between her world and theirs. The funeral is next week, Carl continued. Full club honors. We'd like you to be there. And Lily, we'd like you to ride in the procession. Not as a member, but as family. Iron always said you were family. I'll be there, Lily said, her voice thick. Thank you for calling. She hung up and sat in her shop, surrounded by machines and memories, thinking about the man who'd seen potential in a 14-year-old scrapyard kid and chosen to nurture it rather than exploit it. Then she looked at the tribute bike the Phoenix built from mechanical parts and made a decision. She worked 18-hour days for the next week, finishing the build with a fervor bordering on obsession. When it was done, it was the best bike she'd ever built. Powerful, beautiful, purposeful, a machine worthy of the legacy it honored. The funeral procession stretched for miles. Hundreds of Hell's Angels from across the country, all riding in perfect formation, all honoring a man who'd embodied what the Brotherhood could be at its best. Lily rode in that procession, not in the club formation, but alongside it on the Phoenix bike that represented everything Iron had taught her. She rode with Bobby Chains Rourke on one side and Tiny on the other, the three of them forming a breakaway group that somehow belonged and didn't belong simultaneously. At the memorial, Lily spoke again this time, not as a nervous teenager, but as a master craftsman honoring another master. Iron Callahan taught me that machinery is a language, she said to the assembled hundreds. That brotherhood is a choice you make every day, not just a patch you wear. He gave me opportunities without demanding I become someone I wasn't. He respected my choices even when they weren't the choices he would have made. She paused, her voice strengthening. He told me once that talent should be nurtured, whether it serves the club or not. That building people up was more important than using them up. He lived that philosophy. And because of it, I'm standing here today independent, successful, and grateful. After the ceremony, Carl approached her with a leather-wrapped package. Iron left this for you. Asked me to give it to you when the time came. Lily unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a custom leather vest, beautifully tooled, but without any patches, and a note in Iron's angular handwriting. Lily, you chose your own path, and I respect the hell out of that. This vest is for you to wear however you want. Add your own patches, your own symbols, your own story. You earn the right to ride with your head high and your own identity. Never let anyone tell you who you should be. You figured that out on your own. Proud of you, kid. Keep building beautiful things. Iron. Lily held the vest, feeling the quality of the leather, seeing the craftsmanship in every stitch. It was a gift without strings, a blessing without conditions. It was perfect. That night, sitting around a fire with Maggie, Carl, Tiny, and a handful of older members who'd been Iron's closest friends, they told stories and drank and remembered a man who'd been larger than life. What will you do now? Maggie asked Lily as the fire burned low. Keep building, Lily said simply. Keep honoring the craft. Keep being the woman Iron believed I could be. And the club, Carl asked. You'll stay connected. Always, Lily confirmed. Not as a member, but as family. Iron taught me that brotherhood doesn't require a patch. It just requires respect, loyalty, and showing up when it matters. Tiny raised his beer. To Iron, and to the kid who taught us that sometimes the strongest choice is choosing yourself. They all drank to that. Lily rode back to Barstow the next morning, the sun rising behind her, casting long shadows across the desert. She wore the vest Iron had left her, feeling the weight of it, the meaning. When she got home, she'd add her first patch to it, not a club emblem, but the logo of Morgan's Custom Motorcycles. She'd build her own legacy, wear her own colors, ride her own road. The ghost of Dutch Blackwell had started this journey 7 years ago, pulling a desperate teenager toward a future she couldn't have imagined. The ghost of Daniel Morgan had shown her the costs of blind loyalty. And the ghost of Iron Callahan had taught her that there were many ways to honor the things you love. Lily Morgan chose to honor them all by becoming exactly who she was meant to be. A master mechanic, an independent spirit, and a woman who knew that sometimes the greatest tribute you can give is living a life true to yourself. The Sportster hummed beneath her as she rode through the desert dawn. The engine was perfect, every component precisely calibrated, maintained with the kind of care that came from genuine love of the craft. Behind her, Oakland receded into memory. Ahead, Barstow waited in the shop where she'd continue building miracles from metal and fire. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, full of possibility, free of obligation. And Lily Morgan rode it with her head high, her hands sure, and her heart free. Some machines rebuild you while you rebuild them. Some ghosts save your life while you resurrect theirs. And some families choose you even when you choose a different path. Lily had learned all of this, and it had made her free.